Sometime in the 1970s, Warren Buffett reportedly remarked to friends that inflation behaves like a silent thief. The phrase has endured, perhaps because it captures something people sense but struggle to articulate. A thief, after all, usually leaves evidence, a broken lock, a missing wallet. Inflation does neither. There is no forced entry, no dramatic confrontation, and yet purchasing power disappears, almost politely. Many of us grew up watching our parents hide cash in drawers or between folded clothes. The threat felt tangible, someone might physically take it. Buffett's metaphor points elsewhere. The danger is embedded in the monetary system itself, legal, routine, and largely unnoticed. If anything, that dynamic appears more relevant in 2026 than it did decades ago. Consider a simple example. You hold $100,000 in cash and decide to keep it at home for safety. A year passes. The bills are intact. Numerically, nothing has changed. But suppose prices rise by 7% over that year. Items that once cost $100,000 now require $107,000. In real terms, your $100,000 now purchases what roughly $93,000 would have bought before. No cash vanished, yet your economic position shifted. This disconnect is often described in behavioral economics as money illusion. Individuals tend to anchor on nominal figures, the number printed on the bill, rather than what those figures can actually command in the marketplace. Seeing 6 digits in a bank balance can produce reassurance. Whether those digits translate into sustained purchasing capacity is another matter. If annual inflation runs at 7%, holding $100,000 in cash effectively reduces its real value over 12 months. The money does not shrink physically, it simply fails to keep pace with the broader price level. Meanwhile, wages, rents, food, healthcare, many of them move. Your capital pauses, the economy does not. That raises a more practical question. In an environment like 2026, characterized by digital transactions, shifting central bank policies, and periodic volatility, what does it actually mean to grow your money? The answer begins in a less glamorous place than many expect: saving. Discussions about stock markets, cryptocurrency, or passive income streams are common, yet without surplus cash at the end of each month, those conversations remain hypothetical. Investing presupposes capital. Capital presupposes restraint. Imagine setting aside $200 per day. For some, that may require modest adjustments, fewer impulse purchases, more deliberate consumption. Over a month, that amounts to roughly $6,000. Over a year, about $72,000. On its own, that figure may not feel transformative. Still, it represents optionality. It is the raw material from which future returns can compound. At this point, the mathematics becomes difficult to ignore. The formula above, often introduced in secondary school, models compound growth. The principal, P, earns a return, R, over time, T, with compounding intervals, N, amplifying the effect. What seems modest in the early years can accelerate as gains begin to generate further gains. Suppose a 20-year-old invests $1,000 per month, or $12,000 annually. With a 5% annual return, 5 years might yield just over $68,000. Stretch that horizon to 20 years, and the total could exceed $400,000. Adjust the return to 10% while keeping contributions constant. The difference over decades becomes striking. After 40 years, the total may surpass $6 million. The investor did not change. The savings habit remained steady. The variable was the rate of return, and critically, time. Yet returns must be interpreted carefully. A nominal gain can be misleading if inflation is rising at a comparable pace. Real return approximates nominal return minus inflation. If an investment yields 10% while inflation runs at 7%, the real return approximates 3%. 3% may sound negligible in a single year. Over multiple decades, however, compounding even that modest differential can materially alter outcomes. This perspective complicates the idea of safe money. Parking funds in an account earning 7% while inflation is also 7% does not increase purchasing power. It preserves it, assuming rates remain stable, which they rarely do for long. The broader economic backdrop matters. By 2026, digital finance has become ubiquitous. Central banks adjust interest rates in response to shifting economic pressures. Asset valuations fluctuate. In such a setting, inactivity carries its own cost. Growing wealth, then, may require three interlocking commitments: consistent saving from income, allocation to assets that plausibly outpace inflation, and patience. None of these guarantees success. Markets decline, strategies underperform, risk is unavoidable. There is also a psychological barrier. Many people hope for rapid transformation, doubling capital within a year, achieving financial independence almost immediately. Historical data suggests a different pattern. Large fortunes often accumulate gradually, sometimes quietly, over extended periods. Increasing monthly contributions from $1,000 to $10,000 does not merely scale outcomes linearly. Because returns compound, the long-term result can exceed a simple tenfold multiple. Growth builds upon itself. The metaphor of drops forming an ocean may sound poetic, but it reflects a structural feature of exponential accumulation. Where then should funds be invested? Savings accounts, fixed deposits, equities, diversified funds, dividend-oriented portfolios? Each carries trade-offs in risk, liquidity, and expected return. There is no universal prescription. Context matters: age, income stability, risk tolerance, tax environment. The principle, however, remains consistent. Over time, investments must, on average, exceed inflation to expand real wealth. Delay complicates this equation. Starting at 20 rather than 30 can produce markedly different outcomes, even if total contributions are similar. The earlier investor benefits from additional compounding periods. Time, in this sense, functions as a multiplier that cannot be retroactively purchased. Returning to Buffett's metaphor clarifies the stakes. The threat to savings is not an obvious criminal act. It is the gradual erosion embedded in rising prices and shifting policy. Cash hidden in a drawer may feel secure. Economically, it may be exposed. The central question is less about protection and more about participation. Will money remain idle, or will it be allocated in ways that give it the opportunity to grow? 40 decades from now, one might look back and note that substantial sums once passed through one's hands. Alternatively, one might observe that those sums were invested, compounded, and transformed. Inflation will continue to operate quietly. Whether it diminishes purchasing power or is outpaced by disciplined investing depends, at least in part, on choices made today.